The silver-skinned young Vidali female stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror, her iridescent eyes filled with unused tears. Hannah's hands trembled as she adjusted her worn uniform, preparing for another day at the food processing plant. The meager wages weren't enough. They had never been enough, but it was all she could do to help her family survive. Outside their cramped apartment in the lower levels of New Seoul Station, the constant hum of machinery and distant sounds of ships docking created a dreary backdrop to their lives. The station, once a symbol of interstellar cooperation, had become a haven for those who had fallen through the cracks of galactic society. Hannah's mother lay in the next room, her breathing labored despite the outdated medical unit that recycled her air. The illness had started slowly, first with fatigue, then the coughing, and finally the deterioration that left her bedridden. The doctors called it stellar decay syndrome, a condition that affected Vidali, who spent too long in artificial environments without proper radiation shielding. The treatment existed, but it might as well have been on the other side of the galaxy for all their ability to afford it. Hannah, her father's voice called softly. The collection notices came again. She turned to face him, noting how his once proud posture had become stooped, his silvery skin dulled by stress and worry. Tam, once a respected merchant who traded in rare minerals, now worked loading cargo ships for whatever they would pay. His hands, once adorned with the rings of a successful trader, were bare and calloused. "How much this time?" Hannah asked, though she already knew it would be too much. 30,000 credits, he whispered, the words hanging heavy in the stale air. "The medical center won't extend our credit any further. They're threatening to remove the life support unit if we don't make a payment by the end of the cycle." Hannah's heart clenched. Without the unit, her mother wouldn't survive a standard week. They had already sold everything of value. Her father's trading licenses, her mother's ancestral jewelry, even the education credits Hannah had been saving for university. The food processing plant paid her 5 credits an hour, barely enough to cover their basic needs, let alone the mounting medical debt. The door chime sounded, making them both jump. Visitors were rare in the lower levels, and rarely brought good news. Tam moved to answer it, his movements cautious. The figure in the doorway was tall and elegant, dressed in the sleek corporate style of the upper levels. His skin was the deep blue of the Centaurian race, and his smile was practiced and perfect. "Good morning," he said, his translator rendering his words in flawless standard. "I represent Stellar Entertainment Holdings. May I come in?" Hannah watched as her father's shoulders tensed, but he stepped aside. In their small living space, the corporate representative seemed even more out of place, his expensive suit a stark contrast to their worn furnishings. "I'll be direct," the representative continued, producing a holopad. "Our company has been monitoring your situation. We have a proposition that could solve all your financial troubles." Hannah felt a chill despite the room's warmth. Stellar Entertainment Holdings. Everyone knew about them, though no one spoke of them directly. They operated throughout the galaxy, their entertainment venues catering to the wealthy and powerful. But there were whispers about their other businesses, about the desperate souls who signed away their futures for quick credits. "We're prepared to offer a substantial advance payment," the representative continued, his eyes fixing on Hannah. "Enough to cover all your medical debt and ensure your mother receives the best care available. In return, we require a 5-year contract of exclusive services from your daughter." The room seemed to spin. Hannah knew what exclusive services meant. She had heard the stories, seen the advertisements in the darker corners of the station's entertainment district. Young beings of various species, dancing and entertaining in clubs where the wealthy spent more credits in an evening than her family saw in a year. "No," her father said firmly, though his voice shook. "We are not that desperate." The representative's smile didn't waver. "I understand your concern, but please review the terms." He placed the holopad on their small table. "The contract includes full medical benefits, housing allowance, and performance bonuses. Your daughter would be well protected and cared for. More importantly, we would arrange immediate transfer of your wife to the premium care center in the upper levels. Hannah watched as her father's resistance crumbled. The premium care center, the best medical facility on the station. The place where the wealthy went to be cured, not just treated. From the bedroom came the sound of her mother's coughing, harsh and wet. The medical unit beeped in warning, its recyclers struggling to keep up. "I'll do it," Hannah said, her voice stronger than she felt. Both men turned to look at her. "Hannah." "No," her father began, but she cut him off. "We have no choice, father. Mother will die without proper treatment. I can't let that happen." She turned to the representative. "I'll sign the contract." The Centaurian's smile widened, showing perfect teeth. "Excellent choice, my dear. You'll find our terms most generous." He tapped the holopad, bringing up the contract details. "Just place your hand here for genetic verification." As Hannah stepped forward, her father caught her arm. "Please," he begged. "There must be another way." But they both knew there wasn't. The lower levels of New Seoul Station offered no escape from poverty, no miracle cures, no sudden windfalls. There was only survival, and the choices one made to ensure it. Hannah placed her hand on the holopad. The scanner read her genetic code, and her name appeared in glowing letters. With one more touch, she signed away 5 years of her life. "Welcome to the Stellar Entertainment family," the representative said smoothly. "A transport will arrive tomorrow morning to take you to our processing center. Pack lightly. We'll provide everything you need." As he left, Hannah stood frozen, the reality of what she had done settling over her like a heavy cloak. Her father had slumped into a chair, his face buried in his hands. From the bedroom, her mother's breathing seemed easier, as if somehow knowing help was finally coming. But Hannah felt nothing but emptiness, her future stretching before her like a dark corridor with no end in sight. Tomorrow, she would leave this life behind. Tomorrow, she would become something else, someone else. But tonight, she would hold her mother's hand and pretend that the price of survival wasn't quite so steep. In the station above, the endless stream of ships continued their arrivals and departures, carrying dreams and despair in equal measure. Somewhere in that vast flow of beings and commerce, a young Vidali's fate had been sealed with a simple touch of a holopad, her soul traded for her mother's life. The story of Hannah, like so many others in the lower levels, was about to take a turn. Whether toward salvation or damnation remained to be seen, but one thing was certain: there would be no going back to the simple life she had known before this day. The processing center gleamed with artificial perfection, its white walls and bright lights creating an illusion of cleanliness that made Hannah's skin crawl. She stood in line with 12 others, different species, different stories, all wearing the same blank expression. The silver shimmer of her Vidali skin drew lingering glances from the corporate handlers who moved between the lines, checking documents and scanning identification chips. "Next," called the bored voice. Hannah stepped forward, her few belongings clutched in a small bag. The processing officer was a Terran female with augmented eyes that glowed faintly blue as they scanned Hannah's documents. "Contract type, cultural performer," the officer read aloud. "Initial term, 5 standard years. Medical coverage extension. Immediate family." She looked up at Hannah. "Confirm your understanding that this contract is binding and non-negotiable after the grace period of 48 hours. "I understand," Hannah replied, her voice barely a whisper. She thought of her mother, already transferred to the premium care center. The messages she'd received spoke of immediate improvement, of hope for a full recovery. The price seemed almost worth it. Almost. "Proceed to medical screening," the officer said, stamping the documents with practiced efficiency. Section C, Room 12. The medical screening room was colder than the hallway. A Meridian doctor with scaled skin directed Hannah to undress and stand in the scanning chamber. The blue light washed over her body, recording every detail. "Excellent physical condition," the doctor muttered, reviewing the results. No genetic defects, healthy reproductive system, optimal age range. He spoke as if Hannah wasn't there, as if she were livestock being appraised for market. Next came the enhancement consultation. A chirpy corporate representative with two perfect features discussed options for maximizing her appeal. Hannah listened numbly as they detailed genetic modifications, cosmetic procedures, and behavioral conditioning programs. "We'll start with the basics," the representative said. "Pheromone enhancement, minor structural adjustments to increase flexibility, and the standard pleasure response package. All very routine." Hannah's stomach turned, but she nodded. The contract gave them the right to modify her body as they saw fit. Her consent was a formality, nothing more. The days stretched endlessly. More forms, more scans, more consultations. They took samples of her hair, skin, and blood. They measured her vocal range and tested her coordination. They evaluated her emotional responses and psychological resilience. Finally, they led her to her temporary quarters, a small, sterile room with a single bed and a window looking out at nothing but the station's metal walls. Hannah sat on the edge of the bed, finally alone with her thoughts. The door chimed, interrupting her brooding. "Evening meal service," announced a mechanical voice. A service drone rolled in, delivering a tray of carefully balanced nutrients. As Hannah picked at the bland food, she noticed a small light blinking on her room's communication panel. "You have one pending message," the room's system announced. "Security clearance. Interstellar Rights Commission. Accept or decline." Hannah frowned. The IRC was supposed to monitor working conditions throughout the galaxy, but they rarely intervened in corporate contracts. Still, curiosity won out. "Accept," she said. The screen flickered to life, showing a human male with kind eyes and a serious expression. "Greetings," he said. "I'm Jin-Ho from the IRC's Labor Division. I'm conducting a routine review of recent contract signings. Would you be willing to answer a few questions about your recruitment process?" Something in his tone made Hannah hesitate. The corporate handlers had warned about unauthorized communications, but this was an official IRC channel. They couldn't forbid that, could they? "What kind of questions?" she asked cautiously. "Standard procedure," Jin-Ho replied. "Were you given the full 48-hour consideration period? Did you receive independent legal counsel? Were all contract terms explained in your native language?" Hannah's heart raced. She hadn't received any of those things. The corporate representative had rushed the signing, insisting her mother's transfer couldn't begin until the contract was finalized. "I am not sure I should discuss this," she said quietly. Jin-Ho's expression softened. "I understand. Know that the IRC has a secure communication channel if you ever need to report contract violations or abuse. Your safety and rights matter, regardless of what any contract says." The screen went dark, leaving Hannah with an uncomfortable realization. She had been so focused on saving her mother that she hadn't questioned the contract's legality. Now it was too late. Or was it? Her thoughts were interrupted by another chime. This time, a corporate handler entered, the same Centaurian who had visited her home. "Excellent news," he said, his perfect smile unchanged. "Your enhancement procedures have been scheduled for tomorrow morning. After that, you'll begin your orientation at the Golden Lotus." The Golden Lotus, one of Stellar Entertainment's most exclusive venues. Hannah had seen the advertisements, exotic dancers and companions catering to the galaxy's elite. She had known this was coming, but the reality of it hit her like a physical blow. "Remember," the handler continued, "your family's medical care depends on your full cooperation. We wouldn't want any complications to arise with your mother's treatment." The threat was clear. Hannah nodded, her voice trapped in her throat. "Rest well," he said, leaving her alone again. "Tomorrow, your new life begins." Hannah lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere above, her mother was receiving the care she desperately needed. Somewhere below, her father was probably lying awake too, wondering if they had made the right choice. The IRC message played in her mind. There were supposed to be protections, procedures, rights. But what good were rights when your mother's life hung in the balance? What good were laws when corporations held all the power? As sleep finally claimed her, Hannah dreamed of silver skin turned to chains, of dancing for shadows with hungry eyes, of a kind-faced human asking questions she was afraid to answer. In her dreams, she was falling through endless darkness, and no one was there to catch her. The next morning would bring the first of many changes to her body and mind, but for now, in the quiet darkness of her room, Hannah was still herself, still the daughter who sacrificed everything for her family, still the young woman who dreamed of a different life, still someone who hoped that somewhere in the vast galaxy there might be a way out of this gilded cage. Tomorrow would come soon enough, bringing with it the reality of her contract. But tonight, she held on to the memory of who she was, knowing that soon, that person might cease to exist altogether. Above her, New Sewell Station continued its eternal spin, indifferent to the small dramas playing out within its walls. And somewhere in its maze of offices, a human named Jin-Ho was reviewing her file, seeing patterns in the darkness that Hannah couldn't yet recognize. Jin-Ho stared at the holographic display floating above his desk, his eyes burning from hours of reviewing contracts and permits. Something about the Stellar Entertainment Holdings files didn't add up. The timestamps on Hannah's processing documents showed her contract had been signed and finalized in less than 2 hours, impossible if proper procedures had been followed. He pulled up another file, comparing it to Hannah's case. 3 more Vidali females, all from the lower levels, all with families facing medical debt. The pattern was becoming clear, but proving corporate wrongdoing would require more than suspicions. "You're still here." A voice interrupted his thoughts. Minji, his fellow investigator, leaned against his office doorway. "It's well past shift end." "Look at this," Jin-Ho said, gesturing to the floating data. All these contracts were rushed through processing. No waiting period, no legal consultation, no translation services. And look at the medical modification orders. They're dated before the contracts were even signed. Minji frowned, moving closer to examine the documents. "That's illegal. But you know how these corporations operate. They'll claim clerical errors, pay a fine, and continue business as usual." "Not this time," Jin-Ho said firmly. "I'm requesting an in-person inspection of their facility. The Golden Lotus has never allowed IRC investigators inside, claiming privacy concerns for their clients. But these processing violations give us grounds for immediate access." The next morning, Jin-Ho stood before the Golden Lotus's ornate entrance. The club wouldn't open for hours, but already staff hurried about, preparing for another night of catering to the galaxy's wealthy elite. A corporate representative met him in the lobby, not the usual handler, but a human woman in an expensive suit. "Inspector Park," she said smoothly. "I'm Director CO. We were surprised by your sudden inspection request." "Standard procedure following contract irregularities," Jin-Ho replied, keeping his voice neutral. "I'll need to speak with your recent contractors, particularly the Vidali performers." "Of course," Director CO smiled. "Though I should mention that many are in training sessions or medical enhancement procedures. We take our contractual obligations to prepare them very seriously." They walked through the club's public areas, all glamour and luxury, designed to separate patrons from their credits. But Jin-Ho was more interested in what lay behind the gleaming facades. In a private preparation room, he finally saw Hannah. She sat before a mirror while a technician adjusted something at the base of her neck. Her silver skin seemed to shimmer more intensely than before, likely due to genetic enhancements. "This contractor is unavailable for questioning," Director CO said quickly. "She's undergoing sensitive calibrations for tonight's performance." But Jin-Ho had already noticed the vacant look in Hannah's eyes, the way she barely seemed to register their presence. "What type of calibrations?" he asked sharply. "Standard mood stabilizers and pleasure response enhancement, all within contract specifications," the technician replied before Director CO could stop him. Jin-Ho made a note on his datapad. Mood stabilizers were restricted substances, requiring separate consent forms and medical oversight. He doubted those forms existed. "Hannah," he said gently, "do you remember me?" From the IRC communication, her eyes flickered briefly, something like recognition crossing her face before the vacant expression returned. "I'm not supposed to." "That's enough," Director CO cut in. "These performers must maintain focus during preparation. Surely you understand." But Jin-Ho had seen what he needed to see. The corporations weren't just exploiting desperate families. They were using restricted substances to control their contractors. Back in his office, Jin-Ho began building his case. He compiled evidence of contract violations, medical irregularities, and illegal substance use, but he knew it wouldn't be enough. The corporation's lawyers would tie the investigation up in bureaucratic knots for years. He needed something more, something the corporation couldn't explain away or bury under legal motions. A message notification blinked on his screen. Anonymous sender, encrypted channel. Jin-Ho ran security scans before opening it. The message was brief. Storage Level B, Section 12. Follow the money. Jin-Ho traced the station's architectural plans. Storage Level B housed the Golden Lotus's financial records, physical copies kept separate from the network as a security measure. If he could access those, "You're going to get yourself killed," Min-ji said when he shared his plan. "Or worse, fired." "I need you to run interference," Jin-Ho replied. "Keep their security occupied with official requests. I just need 30 minutes. That night, while the club pulsed with music and light above, Jin-Ho made his way through maintenance corridors to Storage Level B. His IRC credentials got him past the first security checkpoint, but Section 12 required additional clearance. He was about to attempt bypassing the lock when the door slid open. A cleaning drone emerged, and Jin-Ho barely managed to slip inside before it closed again. The records room was vast, filled with rows of data crystals. Jin-Ho worked quickly, scanning labels until he found recent transactions. He copied everything he could, heart pounding with each passing minute. A sound at the door made him freeze. Footsteps approached, then passed. Jin-Ho let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Back in the safety of his office, the data revealed exactly what he'd suspected. The corporation wasn't just running entertainment venues. They were laundering money through a network of shell companies. The contracts, the performers, the clubs, all of it was a front for something much bigger. Most importantly, he found evidence that they were bribing medical facilities to inflate treatment costs, creating the very debts they used to pressure families into signing contracts. "This is bigger than we thought," Min-ji said, reviewing his findings. "We'll need backup. Serious backup." Jin-Ho nodded, already composing messages to IRC headquarters. But his thoughts kept returning to Hannah's vacant eyes, to the other performers trapped in gilded cages. A new message appeared, same anonymous sender. "They know you were there. Watch your back." As if to confirm the warning, his office door chime sounded. Director CO stood outside, her perfect smile now predatory. "Inspector Park," she said, "we need to discuss your unauthorized access to private corporate records." Jin-Ho met her gaze steadily. "Actually, we need to discuss your company's illegal activities. I have enough evidence to shut down your entire operation." "Do you?" she asked softly. "Are you sure you want to pursue this?" "Accidents happen, Inspector, even to IRC officers, even to their families." But Jin-Ho had anticipated this. The evidence was already backed up, distributed to secure locations. There was no going back now. "Threaten me all you want," he said, "but your time is running out. The IRC takes corruption very seriously, and I've just proven you've been corrupting the entire system." He watched her smile fade, replaced by something harder and colder. The game was changing, and they both knew it. The question was, who would make the next move, and what would it cost? In a preparation room far above them, Hannah felt a moment of clarity pierce through her chemically induced haze. She remembered the inspector's kind eyes, his careful questions. For the first time since signing her contract, she felt something new stirring in her chest. Hope. The safe house was small and plain, hidden in the residential section of New Seoul Station's middle levels. Jin-ho sat at a simple table with Min-ji and 3 other IRC agents, surrounded by holographic displays showing surveillance footage, financial records, and medical documents. The problem isn't just proving their illegal activities, Min-ji said, manipulating a display showing the Golden Lotus's security systems. It's getting the performers out safely before the corporation can move or harm them. They're already moving some assets, said Agent Song, a cybersecurity specialist. Large sums are being transferred through their shell companies. They know we're closing in. Jin-ho focused on a grainy image of Hana being escorted to a private entertainment pod. The vacant look in her eyes had grown worse over the past week. The corporation was increasing her doses of mood stabilizers, probably afraid she would talk to IRC investigators again. We need to act soon, he said. The longer we wait, the more evidence they can destroy. And, he paused, thinking of Hannah's fading consciousness. Some damage can't be undone. I have something, Agent Yoon called from her workstation. Medical supply requisitions for the Golden Lotus. They're ordering 3 times the legal limit of restricted substances. Mood stabilizers, memory suppressants, pleasure enhancers, enough to control dozens of performers. That's our way in, Jin-ho said, standing up. Medical violations give us authority for an immediate raid. No warrants needed, no time for them to hide evidence. They'll still fight back, Min-ji warned. Their security forces aren't just for show. That's why we need help. Jin-ho pulled up another file. I've been in contact with the station security force. Captain Lee owes me a favor, and she hates these corporate exploitation rings. She'll provide backup when we move. The plan came together over the next hours. Agent Song would disable the club's security systems and lock down their communication channels. Station security would secure the perimeter and handle any armed resistance. IRC medical teams would be ready to treat performers and gather evidence of substance abuse. What about the families? Min-ji asked quietly. The corporation will try to use them as leverage. Jin-ho nodded. He'd thought of that. I've arranged protective custody for all performers' families. As soon as we move on the club, station security will escort them to safe locations. One more thing, Agent Yoon said. We found this in their medical files. She projected a new document. They're planning to move their premium assets, including Hannah, to an off-station facility tomorrow night. If we're going to act, it has to be before then. Jin-ho felt cold anger rise in his chest. Off-station meant off-jurisdiction. Once the performers were moved, they'd be beyond IRC help. Tonight, he decided. We move tonight. The next few hours were a blur of preparation. Jin-ho recorded his evidence and findings, ensuring multiple backups existed in case something went wrong. He thought of Director Seo's threat, but pushed the fear aside. This was bigger than personal safety. A message arrived from his anonymous source. Loading Dock C midnight shift change. Security will be minimal. Can we trust this source? Min-ji asked when he shared the information. They haven't been wrong yet, Jin-ho replied. And we don't have many options. As station night cycle approached, Jin-ho made one final call to Hannah's father. Keep your wife's medical unit powered up and ready to move, he instructed. When station security arrives, go with them immediately. Don't pack, don't ask questions, just go. It's Hannah, the father began. We're getting her out, Jin-ho promised. All of them, but I need you to trust me. The next hours crawled by. Jin-ho watched through surveillance feeds as the Golden Lotus filled with its usual wealthy clientele. He saw Hannah and other performers moving like beautiful dolls, their eyes empty, their movements precise and programmed. At precisely midnight, Agent Song's virus hit the club's systems. Security cameras went dark. Emergency lights flashed. Doors sealed randomly, trapping security forces in separate sections of the building. Station security moving in. Captain Lee's voice crackled over the comm. All units in position. Jin-Ho led his team through the loading dock, IRC badges granting them emergency access. Inside, chaos reigned. Patrons rushed for exits while security forces tried to maintain order. They found Director Seo in her office, calmly deleting files. "This is corporate property," she said smoothly. "You have no authority." "Actually, we do." Jin-Ho handed her the medical violation notice. "Your operation is shut down, Director, and you're under arrest for trafficking, illegal substance distribution, and corporate fraud." While station security handled the arrests, Jin-Ho and Min-ji headed for the preparation rooms. They found Hannah and other performers in various states of chemical sedation. "Medical team, we need detox units here now," Min-ji called into her comm. Hannah blinked slowly as Jin-Ho disconnected the drug delivery device from her neck. You came," she whispered. "I promised I would help," he said gently. "Your family is safe. You're free now." As medical teams worked to stabilize the performers, Jin-Ho received another message from his anonymous source. "Check the private safes in the premium suites. More evidence there." The safes yielded everything they needed: transaction records, blackmail material, lists of corrupt officials. The corporation's entire network of exploitation laid bare. Hours later, as station morning cycle began, Jin-Ho watched from the medical center as Hannah reunited with her parents. The vacant look was fading as the drugs left her system, replaced by tears of relief and joy. "What happens now?" Min-ji asked, standing beside him. "Now we make sure this never happens again," Jin-Ho replied. "We have enough evidence to change station laws, to implement real protections for vulnerable families. And the corporation, they won't recover from this. Their entire operation is exposed. Other stations are already launching their own investigations." As he spoke, Jin-Ho received one final anonymous message. "Thank you for helping them. Some of us couldn't be saved, but you saved them." He looked at Hannah, now wrapped in her father's embrace, while medical staff examined her mother's improving condition. The corporation had tried to break her spirit, to turn her into just another asset, but they had failed. Sometimes, Jin-Ho reflected, justice wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it was about careful planning, about building evidence piece by piece, about having the courage to act when the moment came. And sometimes it was about remembering that behind every file, every case, every investigation, there were real people fighting to reclaim their lives and their dignity. The night's operation was over, but the real work was just beginning. There would be trials, testimonies, new laws to draft. But looking at Hannah and the other survivors, Jin-Ho knew it was worth every risk, every late night, every threat. Because in the end, justice wasn't just about punishing the guilty. It was about protecting the innocent and giving hope to those who had lost everything except their will to survive. Alarms blared through the medical center as Hannah struggled to focus through the fading haze of drugs. Red emergency lights pulsed in rhythm with her racing heart. Something had gone wrong. Very wrong. "We need to move now." Jin-Ho's voice cut through the chaos. He appeared at her bedside, his usual calm demeanor replaced by urgent intensity. "The corporation's private security forces are trying to retake the building." The sound of weapons fire echoed from somewhere below. Hannah tried to stand, but her legs felt weak, her mind still clouded from the chemical cocktail the club had kept her under. Jin-Ho caught her arm as she stumbled. "Station security's defenses are holding at the main entrance," Min-ji reported, rushing into the room. "But they've got ships docking at the emergency ports. More forces coming in." Several other rescued performers huddled in corners, their silver Vidali skin reflecting the pulsing red lights. Some were still too drugged to fully comprehend what was happening. Medical staff worked quickly to disconnect monitoring equipment and prepare the patients for evacuation. The corporate forces have override codes for the security systems. Agent Song's voice crackled over Jinho's communicator. They're bypassing our lockdowns. You have maybe 10 minutes before they reach your level. Hannah heard the fear in the agent's voice. This wasn't how the rescue was supposed to go. The corporation was fighting back harder than anyone had expected, unwilling to let their profitable assets slip away. "Where are my parents?" Hannah asked, her voice hoarse. The drugs were wearing off faster now, fear burning through the artificial calm. "Safe," Jinho assured her, "already evacuated to a secure location. But we need to get you there too." He turned to Minji. "The maintenance tunnels. Do we still have access?" Minji checked her datapad. "Lower access is cut off, but the upper maintenance shaft is clear. It'll be tight with this many people." Another explosion rocked the building. Closer this time. Hannah could hear shouts and running feet in the corridor outside. "Everyone who can walk, help those who can't," Jinho ordered. "Follow Minji. Don't stop for anything." They moved as quickly as possible through the medical center's back corridors. Hannah supported another Vidali female whose legs kept giving out. Behind them, the sounds of fighting grew louder. Minji led them to a service door hidden behind medical supply cabinets. The maintenance shaft beyond was narrow and dimly lit, designed for repair drones rather than people. "Up," Minji directed, pointing to the ladder that disappeared into darkness above. 20 levels to the safe zone. Station security will meet us there." Hannah helped her fellow performers start climbing. One by one, the rescued workers ascended into the shaft. Some were crying silently, others moved with mechanical precision, their drugged minds unable to process the danger. "They're breaching the medical center." Agent Song's warning came just as Hannah reached the ladder. "Multiple entry points. Get out now." Jinho pushed her gently toward the ladder. "Go. I'll hold them off. But go." His voice left no room for argument. Hannah climbed, her arms shaking with effort. Above her, the line of performers disappeared into the darkness. Below, she heard the service door burst open, followed by shouting and the distinctive sound of stun weapons. The shaft seemed endless. Hannah's muscles burned, her newly enhanced body fighting against the lingering effects of the control drugs. Somewhere below, weapons fire echoed up the metal walls. "Keep moving," Minji called down from above. "We're halfway there." A scream echoed up the shaft. Hannah looked down to see one of the performers losing her grip, exhaustion finally overwhelming her. Without thinking, Hannah reached down, catching the falling woman's arm. Together, they hung suspended in the darkness, both trembling with effort. "I've got you," Hannah gasped, surprising herself with her strength. The corporation's enhancements, meant to make her a better performer, now helped her save a life. More weapons fire below. The corporate forces had found the shaft. Light beams cut through the darkness as they fired upward. "Almost there." Minji's voice seemed distant. "The exit is just ahead." Hannah's arms felt like they were on fire, but she refused to let go of the woman she'd caught. They climbed together, painfully slow, each movement a battle against exhaustion and fear. Finally, she saw light above. Real light, not the angry red of emergency beacons. Minji and station security officers reached down, helping pull performers through the exit into a wide corridor. "Jinho?" Hannah asked as security officers sealed the shaft behind them. "Did he?" "Here." His voice came from behind her. He looked battered but alive, his IRC uniform scorched by weapons fire. "Couldn't let you have all the fun." Before anyone could relax, more alarms sounded. "They're trying to lock down this level," a security officer reported. "We need to move to the evacuation point now." They ran through station corridors that Hannah barely recognized, though she must have passed through them before. Everything looked different from outside the corporation's control. There, Minji pointed ahead. A large cargo transport waited at a private dock, its engines humming. Everyone inside. Hannah helped others board, counting faces, making sure no one was left behind. The woman she'd saved on the ladder grabbed her hand briefly, a silent thank you passing between them. Corporate ships approaching, the transport's pilot announced. We need to launch now. Wait. Hannah turned to see Jin Ho running toward them, carrying someone. Another performer who had collapsed during the escape. He made it inside just as the transport's doors began closing. The launch was rough, artificial gravity struggling to compensate as they accelerated away from the station. Through the viewport, Hannah saw corporate ships in pursuit, their weapons charging. Station security fleet moving to intercept, the pilot reported. They'll cover our escape. Hannah watched as police vessels engaged the corporate ships, forcing them to break off pursuit. The transport jumped to emergency speed, leaving New Seoul Station and its glittering lights behind. Where are we going? Someone asked in the sudden quiet. ICC headquarters, Jin Ho answered. Neutral territory. They can't touch you there. He looked at Hannah. Your parents will meet us there too. Hannah nodded, too exhausted for words. Around her, other performers were finally letting themselves cry, the reality of their escape sinking in. They were free, but freedom felt strange after so long in captivity. The woman Hannah had saved on the ladder spoke softly. They'll try to find us again. Let them try, Jin Ho said firmly. You're under ICC protection now, and we have enough evidence to ensure they never hurt anyone else. Hannah looked out at the stars streaming past the viewport. Somewhere ahead was a new life, one she would build for herself. The corporation had tried to own her body, to drug away her soul, but they had failed. She touched her neck where the drug delivery device had been, feeling only smooth skin now. The artificial enhancements they'd forced on her would remain, but they were hers to use as she chose. Thank you, she said to Jin Ho, for not giving up on us. He smiled, looking as tired as she felt. Thank you for being brave enough to trust us. The transport continued through space, carrying its cargo of rescued souls toward safety. Behind them, New Seoul Station grew smaller, its lights dimming until it was just another bright spot in the vast darkness. But for the first time since signing that contract, Hannah felt truly alive. Whatever came next, she would face it as herself, not as property, not as a performer, but as a free person who had fought for her soul and won. We'll continue crafting Part 6 for you. Would you like me to proceed with writing Justice Served, with focus on the legal aftermath of the rescue, Hannah's testimony, and the corporation's downfall? Once you confirm, I'll write a compelling 1,600-word continuation that maintains the emotional depth and narrative tension while using simple, accessible English. I'll ensure it follows naturally from the dramatic escape in Part 5. 3 years had passed since the night of the escape, but Hannah's silver skin still shimmered with the enhancements the corporation had forced upon her. She stood before the mirror in her apartment at the Interstellar Rights Commission headquarters, adjusting her formal robes. Today, she would address the Galactic Council again, but this time as more than a survivor, as a voice for change. The sound of laughter drifted through her open window. Below, in the ICC's communal gardens, other rescued performers gathered for their weekly support meeting. Some had chosen to reverse their enhancements, while others, like Hannah, had reclaimed them as part of their strength. Their silver skin caught the artificial sunlight as they shared stories and dreams of their new lives. A gentle knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Jin Ho stood there, his IRC uniform pressed and formal for the council meeting. Though his hair had gained a few gray streaks since the rescue, his eyes still held the same determination she remembered from that first meeting in the Golden Lotus. "Ready?" he asked. Hannah nodded, picking up her datapad containing her speech. "The council can't ignore us this time. Not with the evidence from the new trafficking ring we uncovered." Together, they walked through the ICC's gleaming corridors. Staff members nodded respectfully as they passed. Hannah was well known here now, the survivor who would become an advocate, who used her experience to help others escape similar fates. "Your parents arrived safely," Jin-ho said as they entered the transport that would take them to the council chambers. They're already seated in the gallery. Hannah smiled, thinking of how far her family had come. Her mother's health had fully recovered thanks to proper medical care. Her father had found work as a cultural advisor, helping other families avoid the traps that had nearly destroyed them. The corporate debt that had once seemed insurmountable was long gone, erased by the reparations settlement. The council chambers were packed when they arrived. Representatives from hundreds of worlds filled the tiered seats, their attention focused on the central speaking platform. Hannah recognized many faces, some supporters, some who still clung to corporate interests. The council recognizes Hannah of the Vidali, speaking on behalf of the Survivors Alliance. The chief counselor announced. As Hannah took her place at the platform, she saw her fellow survivors in the gallery. The woman she had saved on the ladder now worked as a counselor, helping other trafficking victims. Others had become lawyers, activists, artists, each finding their own way to reclaim their lives. 3 years ago, I stood before you as evidence of corporate exploitation. Hannah began, her voice clear and strong. Today, I stand as proof that justice is possible, but our work is not finished. She presented the new evidence. Financial records, witness testimonies, medical documents showing how other corporations had adapted the Golden Lotus's methods. The council chamber fell silent as she described the patterns they had uncovered, the ways traffickers still preyed on desperate families. We demand more than promises, she continued. We need laws with real power, enforcement that cannot be bought, protection for those most vulnerable. The corporations adapted their methods. Now we must adapt our response. In the gallery, she saw her mother wiping away tears of pride. Beside her, her father sat straight and tall, no longer bowed by shame and desperation. They had healed together, their family bonds stronger for having survived the breaking. After her speech, as council members debated the proposed measures, Hannah sat with Jin-ho in a quiet observation room. Through the window, they could see ships arriving and departing, carrying people from countless worlds. Did you ever imagine this? She asked him. That night in the Golden Lotus, when you first saw what was happening. Jin-ho shook his head. I hope to save lives. You've helped save worlds. A message flashed on Hannah's datavat. Another tip from their network of informants. Another corporation. Another group of desperate people in need of help. The work never ended, but now they had resources, allies, and most importantly, hope. The council is ready to vote, an aide announced. They returned to the chamber just as the chief counselor called for decision. One by one, the representatives cast their votes. Hannah held her breath, counting the numbers. They needed a 2/3 majority for the new protections to pass. The final tally appeared on the giant display screen. The chamber erupted in cheers. The measures had passed by a wide margin. Stronger laws, better enforcement, real protection for vulnerable families. Later that evening, Hannah stood in the ICC's Memorial Garden. A wall of names remembered those who hadn't survived corporate exploitation, while a fountain of silver water represented hope and renewal. She touched the cool liquid, watching it reflect the starlight. We did it, a voice said behind her. The woman from the ladder, now her closest friend, joined her by the fountain. Though you know they'll try to find ways around the new laws. And we'll be ready, Hannah replied. We're not afraid anymore. That night, in her apartment, Hannah wrote in her journal, not the forced performance logs of her captivity, but her own words, her own thoughts. She wrote about healing, about justice, about the ongoing fight for dignity. She wrote about silver skin and strength, about darkness and light, about the power of refusing to be broken. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. More survivors would need help, more traffickers would need to be stopped, more laws would need to be changed. But Hannah was ready. They all were. The silver shimmer of her skin caught the light as she closed her journal. Once it had been a mark of ownership, forced upon her by those who sought to control her. Now it was a badge of survival, a reminder that even the deepest wounds could heal, that what was meant to break you could become your strength. Outside her window, the endless dance of ships continued, each one carrying its own stories of struggle and hope. Somewhere out there, others still waited for rescue, for justice, for a chance at new beginnings. And Hannah would be there, helping them find their way home, just as others had helped her find hers. The story wasn't over. Perhaps it never would be. But that was okay, because every new beginning carried with it the promise of change, and every changed life was a victory over those who would deny others their dignity and freedom. Hannah smiled, touching the silver tears that traced down her cheeks. They too caught the light, turning sorrow into strength, memory into purpose, survival into triumph. The night deepened around her, but she was not afraid of the dark. Not anymore. She had learned that even in the darkest places, hope could survive. And where hope survived, new beginnings were always possible.